We want to turn now to a much less somber topic. It's time for our weekly Reporters Rewind. It is our chance to take an introspective look back at the stories that made headlines this week. At the round table, our guests are author and blogger Miles Klee, who's written about the amazing Cleveland rescuer turned YouTube sensation Charles Ramsey. And also here is Dean Obeidallah. He's a political columnist and comedian who's been following the war in Syria. So welcome to both of you. And also, we kept at the table, even though we thanked her in the last hour, Charlotte Lynch, who's going to join in the conversation here. So thank you guys so much for coming. Let's start off with this incredible kidnapping case and these three women who were kept for over a decade and then, you know, almost miraculously rescued.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, Charles Ramsey, really put his life on the line to rescue these women. It's an incredible story, and it's a really harrowing story. But it's interesting that his kind of YouTube fame has been the internet's gloss on what's a much more complicated story about domestic abuse and race and socioeconomic class and all these topics. So I think it's an understandable coping mechanism that we want to deal with the horror of an event like this by latching on to I don't know, someone who makes us feel a little bit more joie de vivre and less dread.
You know, and we talked about this yesterday in our show. We had an expert that said the same thing, that perhaps it's a coping mechanism, but I don't know. Is it a coping mechanism so much as our willingness to paint people in generalities and stereotype them and even denigrate them in some ways?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you're talking about the auto-tune version of his interview, he actually said he loves it. He said at the TMZ, I love this, I love what they're doing, and he said he's going to play it. And he was happy with it. So I think the person being the subject of it is fine with it. I'm cool with it, to be honest with you.
But there's a lot of people who are offended by it as well, because it seemed like it was reflective of a trend that we're seeing.
And I think that's what it is. It's the trend that these characters, these what we call in our business, you know, man on the street interviews are auto-tuned, and it's usually some person that fits some sort of extreme stereotype of the group that they're in. I think that's what's disturbing.
But no reporter selected him. He selected himself by standing up and helping the situation. I mean, what he did was he is a hero, and I love that he doesn't kind of characterize himself that way. You know, so that we have to embrace him as he is, with all of his nuances and all of his flaws, and his story of redemption. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
I mean, this is someone who had faced his own charges of domestic abuse and actually served time for it as well.
Exactly, and felt like this was some part of his redemption and healing process. And to me, that's an amazing story. So why can't we have a little hope within the horror of this?
Yeah, I agree, but you know, he did a heroic thing.
He did.
And we don't treat all heroes like that.
They don't. And if he was upset by it more, if he would have said, this is ridiculous, I'm being demeaned, I would be more saying, like, this is ridiculous, what are you doing? But he was on TMZ saying, this is great, and I like it. And I think that sometimes we lose the playfulness to the side of being, well, someone's trying to demonize or being protective of our own. And I'm of Arab heritage, and I'm very protective when Arabs are presented in the media in a negative light, I can assure you. And sometimes I look at the intent. Is it to demonize or is it to be playful? And if the person is being playful, made it, they don't have a history of being racist or trying to trivialize a race or group of people, I'm much more defensive of that person doing it. So that's just my sense as a comedian dealing with these issues.
But at the same time, I think he's speaking some very hard truths. I mean, he has the line about like a little white girl running to a black man's arms. And so he's speaking these kind of hard truths, and like the auto-tune, for example, is a way to gloss over that. It's to not hear what he is being joltingly frank about in his interviews.
And I do believe he's a smart guy. Yeah, and just as you had made some keen observations about our society, and they do kind of get lost in the auto-tune thing. Although I will say I laughed as hard as everybody else when I saw it, because it is pretty funny. All right, let's move on to our next topic. And that, of course, is this ongoing saga of what was going to happen to the body of Tamerlan Tsarnaev, suspect number 1 in the Boston bombing. And Christina reported that they finally found a resting place. It's undisclosed. But it's just, I don't know. I don't even know what to think of it.
It's a challenging, I'm Muslim, so it's a challenging situation for our community, because on one hand, you want to respect a body of a person, but the other hand, and the imam up there in the mosque in the Cambridge area did not want to do services for him. He wanted to distance ourselves from him, because to us, he's not a Muslim, he's a murderer. There's a difference. His religion is not about the tenets of our faith. It's about murder and a political agenda.
But that's how it's been characterized.
And that's how I look at it. That's how I think it. But sadly, many Americans look at it that it's another attack by Muslims, and there's something in the Quran that tells you to kill Americans, which it doesn't say that, but people can twist it any way they'd like to twist it, frankly. So I have so little sympathy for him that I can't get as angry as I wish I could, because I don't even view him as a Muslim. I view him as someone who's is an inhuman act, attacking civilians, and using the name of my faith to do it makes it more upsetting to me, frankly.
I think the idea of resisting burying this guy in a specific place, the idea that this country's soil is too good for him, is a little absurd on the face of it. And in a way, it's like a profound symbol of our country's grace and forgiveness if we can kind of have these last rites for this guy who attacked us so horribly.
I completely agree with that point. I mean, one of the things that I love about American democracy is our ability to grow and absorb. Not to mention that we first started off as revolutionaries who would have been characterized today as terrorists. This is not to condone any kind of behavior. So the flexibility in which we have and the ability to forgive, I think, is very important. And somebody to bury them, he's gone.
Yes, it really is sort of interesting, which is sort of what rendered me speechless. So let's just move on to another story. This was a disturbing story, and we've covered this on our show before, and that is the lack of reporting and convictions of military sexual assault amongst our armed forces. And now we find out, and Christina, what is the guy's name? Who was the head of...
This was the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel who was actually assigned to run the very division within the Air Force that enforces the rules governing
military
sexual trauma. And he is arrested over the weekend for allegedly groping a woman's body.
Yeah, and I just find it's a shame.
It's bizarrely surreal, isn't it? I saw a great statistic where they summarized it. They said it's more likely a woman in service in Iraq or Afghanistan will be raped by a fellow service member than killed in action. That's how ridiculous it is right now. And even our society, I mean, 3 women a day are killed by domestic violence. Every 9 seconds, a woman is a victim of domestic violence in our culture. So our military reflects some of our culture. There's something wrong, and it's a man thing. Believe me, it's us doing it. It's not women. And there's sometimes you have a discussion with people, there's 2 sides. There's not 2 sides to rape. There's not 2 sides to domestic violence. It's absolutely wrong. And you see some of the comments by some of the military leaders who almost say, well, rape's in our culture. It's also in the military. It shouldn't be in either place. The military should be held to a higher standard. That's the way I view it.
I mean, you're talking about an institution that cultivates certain instincts and responses for violence. To act like there's anything selective about those responses and those kinds of trainings is pretty naive. I think that you can breed violence into a person, and it's not surprising to me that in a war zone, in a conflict, and anywhere in the Army, in a boot camp, that these kinds of things probably happen and probably get swept under the rug because it is so part and parcel of the entire military mindset.
Yeah, and of course we know that President Obama came out and spoke very forcefully against this and said we will not tolerate this, and the perpetrators of sexual assault in our armed forces will be prosecuted, and that was great that he said it. But isn't it a shame that he had to say it?
It absolutely is a shame that he had to say it, because when I think about the military, you think of moral code in a way, right? That there are rules and you are supposed to abide by them. And that's the whole point of a military group, is that there is protocol. And where in the protocol does it say that sexual assault is okay? And it absolutely should not be on any level.
And nowhere in the military are they suggesting that sexual assault is okay. The problem, though, is how the cases are reported. The fact that a senior ranking a soldier could very well be the only individual that you can communicate this abuse to, as opposed to the various adjudication processes that we have in the civilian world.
But when the practical reality says it's okay, although the rules and regulations say that it isn't, then that there's an inherent contradiction there.
Indeed. I want to quickly get to our last topic, particularly because Dean is sitting here. And of course, Syria has been in the news for a long time and going through the civil war for 2 years. President Obama laid out a red line, and we don't know if it's a red line or not.
Right.
You take it from there, Dean.
I don't think it's a red line anymore. I think that it was a suggested line, but perhaps if you do this, I think he was trying to keep chemical weapons out of the conflict, as opposed to really saying we're going to put boots on the ground to fight there. At one point, I thought the answer in Syria was easy. I'll be quite honest. Remove Assad, the people will rise up, there'll be self-determination, it'll be great. I no longer feel that way. I mean, Assad out, yes, and even John Kerry said that yesterday, he has to be gone. I have no idea what the next step is going to be. I just want to see an end to violence. 80,000 people killed, over 1.5 million refugees.
That's refugees outside of
Right, who have
Syria.
fled,
Who have fled. There are 4 million internally.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a very difficult, because we don't know what the next government will be right now. And you look at what's going on in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood, and you go, well, will it be like that, which is a quasi-democracy with less freedoms, or will it be even more to the right, which would be like a Salafist or even more conservative, or Islamist, or will it be truly a coalition of the people, or will it be sectarian violence like we see in Iraq? I'm so concerned about what the future is. I have no thing to advocate at this point. I'm really at a loss.
And I think the other thing to keep in mind is we're talking about more than 70,000 people killed with conventional weapons.
Yes. Imagine chemical weapons. Absolutely
Exactly.
right.
Yeah, and we're out of time, but then you add to the soup also Israel, allegedly with the airstrikes, of the weapons that were coming from Iran going to Hezbollah. It is a mess, a big old
Beyond
mess.
chess.
Yeah,
beyond
to say
chess.
the least. Miles, Klee, Dean Obeidallah, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in and talking to us. And again, thank you.